Good evening, Sonic. How's everyone doing tonight?
Man, doing good. It's always this rare. It kind of feels nice streaming later in the evening. I feel more in my element.
Yeah, it feels a lot cooler out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Not just temperature-wise, which is welcome in New York here at the moment.
Yeah,
But
you're still up in Brooklyn where it's like it's hotter than it is down here in the south.
dude, it cooled off delightfully today, though. So, I had a great day in the city here. I had a great day, at the Sonic meetup as well. How about you, Drek?
Yeah, it was a good time. It was a cool event and had a good turnout because like honestly, I was kind of like, man, I think the actual day of the event that was Tuesday. I think that
Yeah,
was the day that was like the historic. It was like the hottest day in New York since like
it was a,
2011 or something. And
it was 102 degrees out, dude. 102
yeah, so
degrees out, and I was in
people,
that suit, bro.
yeah, you were in a suit, and but yeah, no, there was like a lot of people ended up coming through. It was nice to see so many people that you talk to every day when they have like a frog cartoon for their picture. It's
Mhm.
nice to make that like real life connection. But no, yeah, it was like good to see everybody. A lot of old faces, some new faces.
Mhm.
Um, Everything was, the event itself was just like really well done. Lots of good merch too.
Mhm.
Shadow had
Oh,
like
thanks,
three
Will.
shirts, man.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, they have a new character they debuted and everything. There was a lot of swag. It was really cool. I love meeting the eggs guys. We got to talk to a lot of really cool people there. It was a good time. Um, I wanted to put this up. I wanted to ask, is this a compliment or is this an insult? The system is a tripod. I'm not sure if that's like a British insult. They'll be like,
Like he's a
"You're a
wanker.
todgy
Like,
wadger." Yeah, you're a todgy wadger. Well, I don't know what that means.
well, in
Uh,
the US, being a tripod means you have a huge,
oh, I see.
yeah,
A tail of some sort or
a
something,
large
perhaps.
tail. Yeah. So, I guess he could take it as a compliment. We'll assume that's the US version.
Right on, BBQ. Yeah. So it was a great time at the conference. It seemed like while we were there too, things kind of, flipped up for Sonic as well. It was kind of magical. It was kind of the opposite of usually when we gather all the Anons in one place, a negative energy forms in the market's dump. But this time it was pretty good. It did the
Yeah,
opposite. We had a little pump, didn't we?
we had a little pump. Just we're still just dealing with the macro stuff. So what happened was um we had another war breakout, of course, which is always great for
Mhm.
everyone's bags. And essentially they created a ceasefire, they wrapped it up to an extent. So then everything started moving. This kind of coincided with the with permissionless and everything. So everyone got a little bit of relief, from the terror that has been happening across the land, across all crypto. So not just like, oh, it's just the
Mhm.
Sonic chart or whatever. So yeah, a little bit of recovery, back into the moving averages there.
Mhm.
This is like the alligator setup. So I mean, theoretically, when it kind of moves back into the moving averages, you're hoping it's just gonna like keep going in that direction. So we'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
you know, all in all, I think Sonic had a really good presence at permissionless. A lot of people kicking the tires, trying to find out what's going on.
Mhm.
People saying, "Oh, who do I talk to?" I'm trying to like deploy something. So we're in this like thing right now where I've described it as like we had like the first wave of DApps, and we kind of had like a lull because then it's kind of like, all right, now like we're loading up for round two. And yeah, it's like, we're about to have a bunch of cool new stuff launching. Sonicsphere being one of them. And they're here today to chat this evening. Um,
Oh yeah. I want to read this. This is their foundation, the goal of the protocol, if you will. It's from the docs. I found this to be a very powerful mission statement. The goal of the protocol is to extract and own as much liquidity on Sonic as possible. I want to hear how they're going to do this, what the strategy is, and how the system works, guys. I think this is going to be a good one.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting. A lot of the things in the docs and, on their X and everything, it's almost described as like a fund on top of,
Mhm.
being like a protocol. So excited to hear what they got to say. They've been in the middle of like kind of like their TGE. So I think
Mhm.
it's pretty close to going live. Oh, what's up, Mace? Mace got to make it for the late night.
Hell yeah. Well, I always knew that guy was a night owl.
Yeah.
I mean, look at his Scully, dude. He's goth. Anyway.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, let's bring up the team, dude. Let's bring up Sonicsphere. Let's get to the bottom of this. We've got Surveyor and Dgen. How you guys doing?
Doing good. Good to see you.
Awesome.
GN boys, thanks for having us. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks for coming on. Thanks for doing this late night party with us.
Well, the late night party was all because of me, really.
This is way past my bedtime, bro.
Timing, but I really appreciate it, guys. I think it's kind of cool having a little bit of a variant. You know, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
You know, I always make it a rule to make the time for an Aussie. They're always cooking up some crazy shit. I want to see it. You know, so
yeah,
I'm willing to take the late nights, the early mornings.
Appreciate it. Yeah, excited to tuck into things with you guys and yeah, peel back the curtain a little bit.
Yeah, give us a brief introduction of you guys, your relationship to the project, and kind of you know, what the goal is. The elevator pitch, if you will. Let's start with Surveyor and then Dgen, just because it's how you guys are stacked.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm Shitcoin Surveyor. I've been on Sonic, fandom for a long time. Big believer. No, my best networks here, all the people I really enjoy working with are on this chain. I know Dgen all the way back from like Spirit Swap days, which I'm always like the underdog Dex guy, and Spirit Swap was that back then. So I liked what they were doing. We talked a lot, chatted. You know, the bear market came around, and we still kind of stayed in touch. And when stuff started picking back up, I was just kind of chatting with him. He told me about this and sent me the docs. It took me like 2 weeks to really comprehend what what they were saying. So, you know, it's not just everybody. It's a complex protocol, and you know, I really believe in it. The way what we're trying to do, I think, will be overall good for the Sonic eco. I don't think that a lot of projects think about that as a base requirement for what they're going to do for a project, and I think a lot of people are still misunderstanding like what the fund's going to do. And so really, I think this is just so important for us to get out there and explain it. Dgen's the best guy at the technical explanations, but you know, I've loved just reaching out to new partners and dexes and just these connections that I've had. Hoping to bring them on board with us. Yeah. So
right on.
Nice, and you've been killing it at that as well. I mean, this is you know why we brought you in, man. It's your wheelhouse, and you're doing an amazing job. I literally wake up at like, I don't know, 6:30 every morning because I have kids and they're little degenerates who don't like to sleep in. And the first thing I do is check my phone, and there's like 50 messages from Surveyor with all of the updates that he's been up to, because you know he's basically, what are you, like 17 hours behind me. So
it's a pretty weird time difference.
He's like a little Jack Russell, man. He just goes and gets at it and doesn't stop. He's relentless, and so you know, obviously you're an integral part of the team, and it's an absolute pleasure having you on with us. So yeah, my background, I was very early in Phantom, heavily involved in Spirit Swap with the Layer 3 team back in 2020 to 2022. Bear market obviously set in, and so I kind of went to ground sort of thinking about, you know, what's something new and interesting that could be developed and bought on chain. Obviously working really closely with Heesh, who's part of Gumball Labs. So this is a collaborative project between Gumball Labs, who have been involved in building a myriad of projects across multiple layer 1s and layer 2s, and CodeStag, who have probably been responsible for building the front ends and managing the back ends of so many projects that you guys would have interacted with but not known about. So yeah, we kind of wanted to look at, when we went to the drawing board, I guess kind of addressing as many problems in DeFi that we could. And the two main that we sort of that were underpinning for us was mercenary capital. Because while I'm a value extraction maxi like the next guy, it's not really sustainable, this whole cycle of extracting value, and then moving on to the next good deal, and then moving on to the next good deal. It doesn't really build any long-lasting value for a chain. And with me being a maxi and then transitioning obviously over to Sonic, you know, that's kind of a goal or initiative that I really wanted to focus on with this project and what we can deliver. You know, ask not what you can give me, but what we can give you. And secondly, being sustainable emissions, which is where, you know, the perpetual call option on Sphere, being OSphere. That's where that token comes into play. So we can tuck into that in a little bit more detail, I guess.
Yeah.
When we peel things back, but this the TLDR.
Yeah, because it sounds like a complex system. I'd love to tuck into it as you're saying. So, like the general idea being sustainable emissions and kind of tackling mercenary capital.
Correct. Yeah.
Trying
Yeah.
kind of benefit from solving some of these, I guess, problems some might say in the ecosystem. Cool. Well, let's get into it, guys. Let's
Yeah, so I
how's it
guess,
work?
what is Sonicsphere?
Yeah.
I'll give you my rundown, and then Surveyor, you're really good at like dumbing it down for me. But if there's anything that gets too technical, just say shut up and explain this more, or go into detail.
Okay.
Yeah, we definitely want to focus on auctions. Saw Fanatic had a question.
Okay.
So, but yeah, let's start at the top. Let's walk through this on my baby's first day, Sonicsphere. You know.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, if we're gonna
So,
do
Lil Boosie. We got Boosie in the chat. Oh wow, holy shit. Okay. Trying to be starstruck.
What's up? Yeah, so look, we're a decentralized autonomous yield fund at its core. And essentially the fund accumulates yield-bearing assets through these gauge auctions, which basically operate in a reverse Dutch auction process. So essentially we're offering up Sphere tokens for people to purchase from the Dutch auctions, from the gauge auctions. And via our governance process, people will basically vote on directing emissions of OSphere towards the various auctions that we run. And so this is basically allowing people to take control over how the fund goes about accumulating yield-bearing assets and how much of those yield-bearing assets that we accumulate at any given time. So in return, people who effectively buy these OSphere tokens from the auctions, they pay yield-bearing tokens to the auction and receive OSphere as a part of this sort of value exchange process. We can tuck into a little bit further why you want to accumulate OSphere.
Yeah, let's pause here for a moment. I think because I think this is like this seems like the major component of it, right? We're simply trying to acquire Sphere tokens to direct emissions, and you're using LP or yield-bearing assets to bid on this in a Dutch auction. So a Dutch auction meaning the price starts high and steadily goes lower, correct?
Exactly. So that's kind of how we incentivize the acquisition of these yield-bearing tokens to take place. So yeah, the auction might start at, say, let's just say we're accumulating X33 tokens for an X33 strategy or whatever, right? So we might start off by saying we want 200 X33 tokens, and we're prepared to offer you 0 OSphere tokens. As emissions start kicking off every hour, each gauge auction is deposited whatever amount of OSphere tokens they're entitled to, depending on how people have voted on emissions to be emitted. And over time, that the amount of those OSphere tokens build up, but also over time, the amount of X33 tokens in this example reduces. So eventually you find parity. The value exchange is 1-for-1. So we might be saying we're offering $100 worth of OSphere tokens for $100 worth of X33 tokens. Some people might take that if they want to, but it can continue to flow over, whereby there is an arbitrage of value exchange happening here. So at any given point, we might be, if you actually click on the auctions page there, there might be a live example that I could maybe give you.
Yeah, and this is the test net right now, in case anybody's wondering.
Correct. So here's a really good example of, like, well, I mean, this would never happen, but people haven't interacted with this gauge in a while. But for example, the Beats one, we're offering what are we offering? We're offering $3.51 worth of OSphere in return for only $3.05 worth of these Beats yield-bearing tokens. So there's a natural arbitrage in value here. So if you pay us $3 worth of Beats tokens, you receive $3.52 worth of OSphere tokens. And that's kind of what stimulates or incentivizes people to participate in this. Now, we don't really expect people to be participating in it for too long. So this is more, I wouldn't get too bogged down with the technicals on this if you're a retail user. This is more just me explaining to you how the architecture actually works. We've already had multiple MEV bot builders reach out to us and say, is it okay if we bot this? Will you guys help us? And we've said, absolutely, because that's what we want to happen. We want this thing botted because it automates the whole process and it makes it more decentralized as well.
Okay. We have a question from Mace Papa. Is the decrease in price of the Dutch auctions linear? Or is there a set rate?
It's linear.
Linear. Okay. So the bots decentralize it and kind of equal out the system more quickly. So the average person isn't going to really be benefiting from the arbitrage opportunity here.
Well, they can if they want to compete. I mean, absolutely. It really just depends on whether they want to take the arbitrage quicker than a bot might. The bot might be hanging in there for a 5% premium, and that's how the MEV builder has coded the bot. Whereas people might be willing to take less of an arbitrage premium and snipe it a little bit earlier. It's really up to them.
I see. Okay. Baseball's got a follow up. What's the big?
I think we were losing Corval there for a second, but he was saying that leads me to another question. What's the benefit to the linear reduction versus an arbitrary binding curve?
Yeah, that would be. I'm going to divert that question and get back to him. That would be a question for Heish, who unfortunately couldn't make it on the show today. So this is primarily his wheelhouse in terms of architectural strategy. So Mace, if you want to jump into our Discord and ask that question, I can absolutely put you on to the best man to answer that.
Yeah, I can link you up with Heish. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, this is basically like how you guys acquire your assets for your fund or treasury, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, exactly.
So and how long will these last typically?
So we'll last the entire epoch period, right? So essentially, let's just say 10% of the scheduled OSphere supply to be emitted for that 7-day epoch period is at a set rate. So it will essentially just emit that out so it lasts the entire 7-day period based on whatever those emissions need to be. So the auctions will always be running in perpetuity, but depending on, let's say an auction that receives 20% of the votes versus an auction that receives 10% of the votes, they're simply going to, that gauge auction is simply going to accumulate OSphere at a quicker rate. And so therefore the fund logically is going to be accumulating more of those tokens because the auctions are executing quicker.
Okay. And maybe we should back up a little just to like specifically talk about, there's like several tokens basically that people interact with in this system. So why don't you break down just kind of like what each token represents and how it like works with the protocol?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great way to start. So OSphere is essentially where everything starts, and so OSphere acts as a perpetual call option on the price of Sphere with a strike price of 1 Sonic. So after the TGE, the only way that new Sphere comes into existence is minting it by exercising that call option. So to exercise that call option, you need to have skin in the game. And this is partly how we keep people honest within the ecosystem and making sure that they're making good judgments around the ecosystem, because your liquidity is essentially at stake there. So you pay 1 Sonic to exercise 1 OSphere in order to receive 1 Sphere. So the OSphere is burnt and then new Sphere is minted into the ecosystem. Why would you want to do that? Well, Sphere could be trading at a premium to the cost of exercising that options token. So let's say Sphere is trading at 3 Sonic, but the cost to exercise OSphere to get that Sphere only costs you 1 Sonic. So again, there's a natural arbitrage premium there. From there, you've got Sphere, which obviously is the main ecosystem token, where you are incentivized to stake that Sphere in order to receive Gsphere. Gsphere gives you governance rights, so voting, plus also the ability to acquire any OSphere that's emitted into the ecosystem as incentives, as well as any of the reward assets that the fund accumulates through its yield-bearing tokens, which are then liquidated for Sphere and then distributed back to the ecosystem proportionately.
Okay, so OSphere is basically, that's like the emission that you earn, where you are allowed to claim your sphere for like 1 for 1. Gsphere, I guess, comes into play with, I guess it's sort of like a more like a V3 voting system. Is that correct?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's based on the V3 voting system, but the lockup and epoch periods are only for 1 week. We really didn't want to sort of make people suffer those long-term lockup periods.
Yeah. Okay.
Wait,
Yeah,
so what's the cost to exercise the O token? It's 1S,
It's
1S
always
per.
1S. So it's a perpetual strike price of 1S per Osphere.
Okay. Oh, okay, I see.
So let's say that Sphere is trading at 3 Sonic, and you accumulate a bunch of Osphere either through the auctions or through emissions. You can then take those Osphere. Let's say you're in 100. You go ahead and exercise those auctions, and so you pay 100 Sonic, which puts Sonic into the bonding curve, and you receive 100 Sphere. You could, in theory, if you wanted to, go and sell that 100 Sphere for the premium, and receive 300 Sonic in return. And so that's where the natural value arbitrage is created to kind of counter or not disincentivize selling, but counter the natural value extraction maxi within everybody from doing that is the fact that you can actually go ahead and borrow against your Gsphere position. So you lock your sphere for Gsphere. If you go into the borrow tab there, it essentially allows you to collateralize that Gsphere and borrow against that at a 97.5% loan to value ratio. So what that means is you still retain all of the upside in terms of voting, governance, and your share of the yield that the fund acquires. But you basically get 97.5% of whatever it costed you to exercise that Osphere to receive the sphere back in return. So that gives you two options. You can either loop this thing into infinity and really level up your governance and therefore the amount of yield that you're entitled to from the fund, or it simply frees you up to do other things within the ecosystem, whether that's using that Sonic that you've borrowed back from the bonding curve to go and accumulate yield-bearing tokens to participate in the auctions if you want to go down that route, or hell, go and build an LP elsewhere, or invest in whatever other meme coin is trending at the time if you're that way inclined. But essentially, it converts what's typically in a liquid position into the option for people to turn it into a liquid position.
Okay, so I can borrow against my Gsphere.
Correct.
And the liquidity that I'm borrowing from is from the bonding curve.
That's correct. Yeah. And so
which
this is
supplied by people exercising their O token.
That's correct. Or by people who are buying Sphere directly from the bonding curve as well.
And so when I'm borrowing against it, can I still vote with it? Or is it like...
No, it doesn't. It doesn't remove any rights for you to be engaged or participating in the ecosystem. The reason why this is allowed is like you just said, and the reason why the bonding curve can remain solvent is purely because that Sphere is always backed by one Sonic. So by locking that up into a governance position, it means you can't sell that Sphere. So there is no solvency issues, but you can borrow against it if you like. 97.5% LTV is because there is a 2.5% fee, which then flows back into the ecosystem anyway. So Gsphere holders get a cut of that fee.
Wow.
Yeah. So basically, like when you're swapping for tokens, in a way, it's kind of more like you're minting as you're putting, you're putting that S into the bonding curve and everything. And then I guess what happens is, in a way, you can arb for profit with Osphere, since there are other things like mint fees and other things that kind of like help like bring up the price of Sphere. So it's kind of like an eternal price is kind of moving up. Then it kind of gets leveled out, I guess, as people claim Osphere. And then you also have the looping for kind of creates like a black hole. So I guess eventually, I guess in a way it's kind of like you can look at something like eggs, where it's like eventually, as you get closer to all the tokens being distributed and stuff, it's like the price can basically only like slowly grind up. Would I have that right?
Yeah, so I mean, there is no there is no actual max supply of Osphere tokens. So there will be external liquidity to Osphere as well. If people want to just go and sell that Osphere for what it's worth, which is basically the cost of Sphere -1, because that's its natural value creation, right? -1 is the expense for you to exercise that Osphere. So there kind of is no limit to this. It's really determined ultimately by how people want to interact with the ecosystem in a true decentralized manner. We would obviously advocate for people to take a structured approach to this. So in an ideal setting, it would be people exercising their Osphere for Gsphere, for Sphere, locking that Sphere for Gsphere, participating in governance. If you want to free up some of that capital, great, borrow against the bonding curve rather than sell. Maybe loop that position if you want to. And when Sphere is built up to a price point where we've got some really solid liquidity there, great, start to unwind some of your positions and start to take profit if you want to, and really realize that 10x gain, if we're trading at, 10 Sonic per Sphere. Obviously, we can't control that, and it is a free market, which we're totally advocates for as well. But at the end of the day, that would be the ideal outcome and the ideal setting. The price of Sphere is really determined by two factors. A, I guess, people's appetite or interest for getting involved later on in the piece, after the TGE, after the ICO. The only way for you to really get into the ecosystem at that point is to somehow get your hands on Osphere by participating in the auctions, or by buying Sphere directly from the bonding curve. That is it. The reward process is something that we haven't really tucked into yet. So how these auctions work is each auction has a mini fund contract associated with it. So the mini fund is kind of like a strategy that is designed to interact with that specific yield bearing token. So it might be, some auctions we're acquiring Beats derived YBTs. Some auctions we might be fucking around with some EULA strategies, some whatever project it might be. So the underlying mini fund basically then says, okay, put these tokens to work here, farm this yield, and each time that the gauge auction is exercised, a call function is made to the mini fund that is associated with that gauge auction. That basically says, go and harvest all of this yield that's pending. There might be, $100 worth of Beats yield pending or Shadow yield pending or whatever. And that then sends it through to the reward auction that you're actually seeing at the bottom of the screen there, the Sonicsphere auction. And so this is how we actually automate the liquidation and reward distribution process. So here, what we're basically saying is the opposite of the above. We are willing to sell you these reward tokens that the fund has accumulated in return for Sphere. So what that does is it basically forces the MEV bot or the user, whoever's really interested in executing this auction, to go and buy Sphere from the bonding curve, which puts buy pressure on Sphere token. We sell them the reward tokens that we've farmed in return for Sphere, and that Sphere is then distributed back to Gsphere holders.
Okay, so with the Sonicsphere auction then, but like when people go into the Sonicsphere auction though, they receive the like the rewards from the protocols, or were you saying that it sells those rewards and then gives them more?
They receive the rewards. Okay. It's then up to them as to whether they can sell them directly on the open market, or they can put them to use. Let's say if you're an X33 maxi and you want to go and put those X33 tokens to use in your own strategies, that's entirely up to you. But it's essentially a means of acquiring these tokens at a slight discount. Again, because there will always be that value exchange and arbitrage. So it's basically giving people the right to purchase these tokens at a discount.
Gotcha. And it's the same thing with the Sonicsphere auction, where it's just like every epoch it delivers the rewards.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I'm starting to get my head around it here.
All of this process, again, I just want to highlight, as an average user or a retail user that's kind of like really struggling to grasp these concepts, you don't really need to participate in this process if you don't want to. I mean, there's absolutely additional.
Yeah,
value.
let's give it to like let's condense this to like what is the typical user experience going to be when you come to
Yeah.
Sonicsphere? Like,
Yeah.
who is this for?
That's a good
Like
one.
primarily to play with. It seems like if I like your basket of assets, I want to acquire the rewards being generated here. So I want to acquire Gsphere, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And the only way to get Gsphere is either by acquiring the options tokens,
So-
by participating in the auctions, or by buying Sphere from the bonding curve.
Okay,
So
so
like
yeah,
that's the main user group.
and so
yeah.
I acquire this Gsphere and I borrow against it. Bada bing, bada boom.
You have the option to borrow against it. I mean, you don't have to. But I mean,
why
obviously,
wouldn't I?
why
Like, what
wouldn't
is
you?
the liquidation like?
Exactly. I mean, I would personally, and that's probably the capital efficiency component of the ecosystem that I actually like the most. I hate being illiquid. I like having options to do whatever I want to do. And so that's primarily why I love what we've built so much, is it gives end users the ability to have exposure to the entire upside, not only of Sphere, but also the yield generating properties that the entire ecosystem has to offer by virtue of the rewards that the fund is able to harvest on your behalf.
And I guess since there's not like a visual right now on the voting, now when you're voting, you are basically voting for like what's gonna pop up on these auctions.
There should be a visual for the voting. If you go there, it could be maybe because your wallet is not connected. You might have to connect your testnet wallet, but yeah, try and.
Let's see.
Yeah, there you go.
It says it's fetching. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, essentially, this is where you as the user are going to determine, X, Y, Z is a shit coin. It's not going to deliver much long-lasting value. I don't want to dedicate any voting power towards that. But the SwapX, the Shadow, and the STS strategies are the strategies that I want this fund engaging in because I see long-term value in those. So this is where you'd obviously make those votes, and those votes determine how much OSphere will be emitted for that epoch to those gauge auctions.
Okay, gotcha. So that's the main benefit for the voting is to, kind of like direct the emissions for the auctions.
Yeah, you become a part of the fund management process. You get to have your say and determine what you want the fund acquiring, because ultimately the fund is the net asset value of the fund is a direct representation of the value of Sphere at the end of the day.
All right, got you. So in theory, once this thing goes live, you'll probably actually see all kinds of different stuff here.
Oh yeah, I mean this is testnet. At the moment we're making deals and partnerships with myriad of Sonic native protocols out there. I think we've made one announcement this morning already, and we've got another one coming up. But there'll be a ton there. I mean, at the end of the day, the core value that proposition that we're kind of I've overlooked here and haven't mentioned yet is we're here to help protocols.
That's who the other group that this is for is protocols. To get involved in these auctions, get auction gauges, and then we're basically pushing, our emissions into it and purchasing their liquid assets or liquidity pairs out of either V2 or vaults, and we're locking those in the fund in perpetuity. They don't leave. So the partners that we're making, we're saying we're going to give you a gauge going on. We'll do co-marketing. We'll work together. We want this gauge in our auctions, and that it benefits those protocols to have permanent liquidity. I think we all know that. So
yeah. So that's the benefit if you're a protocol is that, for instance, on say like this shadow gauge here, they're going to have to give you guys those LP tokens to get the emissions out, and with that they'll get some kind of discount, some kind of profit. So they're adding liquidity, and then you guys are permanently basically locking that liquidity because you're using that to farm for your strategies.
Correct. That's exactly right.
That is exactly correct. Yep.
Yeah. So that's a good benefit for protocols. I mean, especially if you were trying to raise large liquidity for your majors, or I guess even if you were a standalone project, it would be worth it if you were trying to like kind of add to your liquidity that's effectively being locked forever.
Yeah, we onboarded as a partner this just actually between our previous stream is amped finance. So we're going to be, once they go to launch and then we go to launch, we're going to acquire their vault token, which I think will be beneficial to them. And yeah, no.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so yeah, it is like a nice way for, long-standing projects, but also like newer projects could like really benefit from partnering up.
Absolutely.
That's correct. Yeah.
So we're going to push a lot. I mean, this hopefully for them is going to push more liquidity upon launch and create a healthier vault for them. They're just getting started out. They need some healthy liquidity there to do what they're trying to do. And that's tough on Sonic for perp exchanges.
Yeah. So it's an interesting flywheel, because it's like the protocols are getting liquidity with a guarantee of, basically being locked up. And then the users are hopefully, earning a discount on Sphere by, providing those, those tokens for the auctions.
That's exactly right. That's right. Yeah. That's basically the incentive flywheel there. I guess sort of like talking a little bit about basic user flow. We kind of overlooked that and skipped that and went into the weeds of the technicals again. But as a user, let's say so go to the swap page there. Let's say you've somehow managed to acquire some Osphere. Buddy might have sent it to you, or you were lucky enough to snipe one of the gauge auctions. So you'd go to Osphere, you'd click the exercise button there, you'd type in the amount of Osphere you want to exercise. That will be 1-for-1 at parity with Sonic, and the output of that will be the same amount of Sphere. From there, you take your Sphere, you stake it for Gsphere, which is in the Gsphere tab there. So you're basically locking yourself in for 7-day epoch period at that point. You can then go ahead and borrow against that Gsphere, basically getting 97.5% of your initial value back. That simple. That is literally all you're going to do as a user. From there, you're going to be getting passive rewards each week in the form of Sphere and Osphere. You're then going to take that Osphere, exercise it, complete the process again, and continue looping. If you want to get super degenerate, you could borrow against your position and just keep looping it. So borrow Sonic from the curve, go and buy Sphere from the bonding curve, lock that Sphere for Gsphere, borrow against that Gsphere again. And you can basically loop yourself to infinity to really level up your governance power. Obviously, the downside to that is when you want to unwind your position, that's going to be a relatively large unwind. But look, if the price of Sphere is 10x over that time, then it's a worthwhile exercise to go ahead to do if you want to take some profit.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you can tell Heesh I'm doing him a favor. He can go ahead and get started on that one-click unwind feature.
One-click unwind. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
No, that's actually a really good idea.
Yeah, no trouble at all. He should just he should start thinking about that.
Put that up real quick, bro. Get on it.
Ruin his weekend.
We'll put a little royalty fee in there for you, Drac.
I mean, hey, I'm making you guys money now. You know what I mean? You charge a little fee, so someone doesn't have to sit there and unwind for like 30 minutes, and
goes to Drac.
It goes to me. The fee goes straight to me, so it works.
We'll call it the Drac unwind. So I guess from the perspective of Sphere, like why Sphere? What does Sphere represent, and why would a DAO token, a DAO, or project want to hold the token? So I kind of like to think of Sphere as an omni token where, the net asset value of the fund acts as an index of exposure to the entire Sonic ecosystem and the yield bearing opportunities that can be extracted from the Sonic ecosystem, right? So if you want exposure to the entire Sonic ecosystem's upside potential, along with all of the yield that can be collected across it, but you don't want to have to manage yield farming across 3 different dexes, 2 different aggregators, 4 different fucking vault strategies. We kind of automate this whole process for you, I guess, where Each individual gauge auction has its own mini fund that's fully automated. So these strategies basically do all of that work for you and farm the yield from the yield bearing tokens that each fund is responsible for managing. It automates the liquidation of that process that we've already covered through the reward auctions, and then uses that yield to buy Sphere and pass that ecosystem back to Gsphere holders in the form of Sphere. So I guess I would say that Sphere is not only a direct representation of the fund's net asset value, but also the future value that the yield-bearing tokens, that their net asset value can be extracted for Gsphere holders. So Sphere kind of aggregates and encapsulates the overarching value of the entire Sonic ecosystem. In terms of like, why a DAO or a project would want to hold it, I can think of many reasons, but in short, it's kind of a super simplified treasury management strategy, really, whereby investing, some of the DAO or project's treasury into the fund enables the treasury to not only capture value from the entire Sonic ecosystem, but by participating early in Sonicsphere, there's also a potential to capture all of the upside potential that Sphere has to offer also. So within that package, the management of yield extraction, liquidation of yield is fully automated. So there's less admin for treasury managers also there. So you simply buy Sphere, stake for Gsphere, vote on the gauges that you want the fund to acquire, and then chill. Each week we send weekly Sphere rewards. The treasury manager can then stake these for even more governance exposure and yield share, and then borrow that staked Sphere back from the bonding curve, meaning that you're left with full exposure to future yield and constantly compounding that exposure. Plus, by collateralizing your governance position and borrowing that Sonic back from the bonding curve, you get a liquid position back from the bonding curve. So you don't have to sell Sphere. You can simply stake it, borrow it back from the bonding curve. And it's these elements of capital efficiency that, for me, if I were a treasury manager, it would be a no-brainer for me,
So about so a big chunk of the value comes from the underlying assets and their future yield, like the yield being priced in as well. And then this bonding curve kind of creating like a price floor with the amount of assets like accumulating over time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So what about the diversification of the assets that are making? So it's going to be a big list, I think, is what Drac pointed out, right? Like,
yeah.
So we should see fair amount of diversification. So like, because if it's just like 4 dexes, right, 3 of them could do outstanding, but if one tanks, that's still 25% value just gone.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
So we're diversifying across a whole range of not only decentralized exchange LPs, basically anything where yield can be derived from. So they might be single
stake products, yeah, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there might be single staked assets across, EULA or Aave. They might be, yield vaults following 4626 standard as well. Those are going to be super awesome for us managing concentrated liquidity positions. So there'll be a myriad of these. So essentially, the team's going to see these to start with, and then once governance takes over, people can start proposing other gauge auctions that they want to add as new projects evolve and come out into the ecosystem.
Right. So a large part of the process of the money we receive for the TGE goes to acquiring those initial assets.
Gotcha. So like the process, it's decentralized, but do you guys have like a kind of like a gatekeeping process, I guess, for getting things implemented? Because it sounds like what you guys are saying, we're going to headhunt as like a diverse range of assets as possible, right? But there's also like a decentralized aspect, right, where people can kind of just submit their own, or
yeah. So first and foremost, a lot of that will happen through Snapshot, but we are just quietly, don't know if I want to say this yet or not. We are talking to a protocol that allows for full on-chain governance. So eventually, how we want this to happen is someone makes a proposal with a gauge auction already built, if they want to. They can submit that proposal for voting, and if that proposal passes, it's automatically executed on-chain.
Nice. Okay. I see.
Well, we're getting close to an hour here, but I did want to touch on, I mean, you guys are currently in your TGE right now. 6 days left before this thing goes live.
As long as we hit our min cap at 5 mil. Sonic, correct.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of contention around this. I think this is a good thing to sort of address, but some people agreed with it, some people disagreed with it. From our perspective, we did a lot of forecasting, modeling, and number crunching to actually give this thing some legs. We didn't want to just set it out into the wild and then it eventually just dies because of lack of resources or lack of capital required. So the minimum figure we kind of fell to was 5 million Sonic, which we realize is a very lofty, very lofty goal. But at the end of the day, look, we ourselves we don't want to get caught short managing, what ends up being a shitty project because it has none of the backing capital that's required or none of the resources that's required for it to really have a good chance at survival.
Or healthy liquidity for
Yeah,
our pairs. Yeah.
half of the raise alone is going to be used to buy Sphere from the bonding curve to bring the price of Sphere up at parity with what people get in on the TGE. And the remaining portion of the TGE funds will be used to seed liquidity on external dexes. It will be used to have a backing reserve for the price of OSphere. So if Sphere falls below a certain price point, we buy it back in order to retain the value of OSphere. Along with 30% of the raise actually being used to start priming those initial gauge auctions until MEV bots take over. So these were sort of core components that we really drilled into and said, when we're standing at the drawing board and going, how do we actually make sure this thing survives? This is the figure that we fell to after all of our modeling. So yeah, at the moment we are currently in negotiations with some bigger external investors who might be able to help us out reach this goal. Along with other projects and protocols who have indicated interest in getting involved in the TGE, helping us out, and in return we give them a gauge auction. So yeah,
you guys know how Sonic is. Everybody's waiting to the last week. I mean, I'm not going to deposit into it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to add money till the last week. So we made it a month long, and we've been building partnerships slowly, but it's speeding up as we get into this week. Obviously, we're doing more appearances. Talking with nearly every protocol on chain that I had. Large decks, any of those. So I mean, it looks, if you look at it over time, but the last week is when we're really going to hit it. We have some commitments already that aren't deposited. I'm pretty confident we'll hit it before the TGE.
Nice.
Yeah. We're hoping everyone on the sideline and in the bleachers at the moment will all
only one partner has made a contribution so far. So yeah, and we have others locked in and excited about it, and yeah.
Well, awesome.
That's my job, and I'm on it.
I hope you guys. I hope you guys hit the cap.
Yeah.
The project's very interesting. I can see why. People around Sonic are excited for it. It's a unique primitive. So one thing I was going to say, shout out to Amped Finance. They were just on the show, but he said, did someone say yield vaults based on 4626? Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so 4626 is essentially a vault standard that, from our perspective, where it's valuable for us is it allows us to extract yield from an underlying position without affecting the principal capital. So let's say, we're constantly piling the yield bearing tokens that we receive into this 4626 strategy, which is just a vault standard. And it allows us to, rather than having to pull, for example, pull the entire liquidity pool position in order to realize the profits, right? It just means that we can pull the yield without affecting the principal. And so, yeah, Amped, have we've announced that, right? Right.
We did. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I can say that now. I can say that. But yeah,
Yes.
Amped, we were on a show with them. I think it was last week, and what he said here is, did someone say 4626? When he mentioned on that show that they were following 4626 standard, I was like, oh, we got to talk to them.
I was like, I'm a deal. I got him. Let me get.
Well, yeah, was trying to give them a little cross promo. So
yeah, no, they're awesome.
He made sure, he said, make sure you talk about us on there.
Yeah. We love what they're doing. I think it's really awesome and unique, and the fact that they're following 4626 just is super interoperable with what we're doing here. So we figured, why not?
I just want real on-chain perps on Sonic. That's all I want, man. Without
Yeah,
like
bring
wicks, without any wicks to 0, please.
Well, yeah, we're pretty much running out of time here. We
That's
covered a
cool.
lot of stuff. We appreciate you guys. It was fun. We always enjoy doing a GN Sonic every once in a while. Is there anything you kind of want to throw out there for your parting?
No, I mean, just anybody who's got questions, we're always around. If you're not in the Discord, you can DM me. I'll make sure you get any questions answered. Protocols, I mean, I'm constantly reaching out to them. So most of the ones that would come to mind, we've been in talks with. But any newer guys coming up, trying to launch any kind of vault project, anything like that, or just looking for V2 liquidity with healthy yield and somewhere to partner up with and help them build that, we want you to reach out. We'll see what we can do and, build the ecosystem together. Keeping liquidity on this chain is what's going to build this chain. So that's
What a
really part of our
on.
mission. Yeah.
What a perfect summary. I can't beat that. I guess because Silver did such a good job at wrapping that up, I just kind of want to impart and finish up by saying one thing. Drac, Corval, we love what you guys are doing. This is a fantastic initiative. Gnsonic, you guys have really filled a gap here. I think you guys are incredibly funny, just the way that you guys are able to and witty, the way you guys are able to run this thing off the cuff. I wish I had half of your wit.
Thanks, dude.
I'm no
Hey,
host,
thank
man.
you.
I'd never host something. No.
Mad respect. And
I'm too ADD for that shit. Yeah.
I feel like coming on Gnsonic is almost like a rite of passage for any builder on Sonic. So it's been an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for hosting us, guys. And let's see where the chips fall next week. Anyone out there on Sonic who's on the sidelines, jump in, man. The water's warm.
Go.
If we don't hit win cap, we'll refund you. No stress.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Right on. Thank you guys so much. That was so wonderful. And I want to thank you guys for coming on. I think it was a great show. Interesting product, interesting primitive. TGE live now. Check it out, folks. And yeah, any last words, Dracula?
I think schedule's been a little crazy this week with permissionless. So we will not have a show tomorrow morning, but we'll be back regular schedule next week, Tuesday, Friday. Like our friend Degen here said, if you are a builder and you want to come on, even if you've been on the show before and you want to talk about something new or whatever, always reach out to us on Telegram or X or wherever. And thanks again, Sonicsphere, and we will see everybody next week.
Yep.
Good night, Sonic.
Have a good weekend, guys.
Yeah.
Gnsonic is Corval and Dracula Presley. GM.